Welcome to Module 4, Understanding Today's Early Childhood Families. So in this module, we're going to be looking at parenting styles. And we have 4 different styles presented here. Authoritative parenting, authoritarian parenting, permissive parenting, and uninvolved parenting. Now, authoritative parenting is a top-down way of parenting where you set goals for the child and you set rules and you set standards, and the child has to obey. They do have the ability to talk back and forth with you, but really, as a parent, you are the one in charge. We then move to authoritarian parenting. This is a very top down style where there's really no back and forth. The parent sets the boundary, this is what must be done. And if the child does not achieve the goal, instead of having the back and forth, there's a punishment. There is ways that you must meet the goals. So it's a real top down where the parent is 100% in charge, and there's none of that give and take that we might see from another form of parenting, like authoritative parenting. Now, there's another form of parenting too called permissive parenting. And this type of parent might want to have back and forth, but they do not have an authoritarian role. They're not setting real goals for the child. Instead, the child is the one that sets the goals. The child is the one that sets the standard, and the parent really allows the child to set the stage for what happens within the household. Now, there's lots to be said for all these different forms of parenting, except we get to the uninvolved parenting. Regardless of all the other forms of parenting, the uninvolved parenting is the one that causes the most problems. This parent is not involved. They do not set goals. They don't have boundaries. There's no back and forth. This is someone who simply has a child and the child lives in the house. And this really has the worst outcomes for children. Now, in terms of these, they can be classified into demanding, undemanding, and warm and cold. So authoritative parenting has a democratic style where the child can talk back and forth. The parent does set the stage, but it's much more flexible and it's a warm form of parenting. They're responsive and they do have demands, but there is a back and forth. The next form of parenting is the permissive, which is also a warm form of parenting, but falls into the undemanding category. It's much more indulgent. It much more centers around the child as opposed to goals for the child. The authoritarian parent is more on the cold side and demanding. They can be referred to as helicopter parenting, tiger style parenting. It's very intense. It really is a lot of goal setting. It's a lot of guidance from the parent, and it doesn't have that back and forth. It's listed as inflexible in terms of how people parent. And the last is the uninvolved, where the parents aren't engaged. They don't care what happens. They're not involved. It's undemanding and it's cold. And as I said, this is really the hardest for kids, and kids have the worst outcomes when dealing with this type of parenting. Now, we move from parenting into thinking about stages of attachment. And this really does connect with parenting because we want the children to connect. We want them to be attached. If children don't go through attachments, they have a lot of worse outcomes as they get older. So the stages of attachment would be pre-attachment, where birth to 6 weeks, the baby is just being cared for and hasn't made that back and forth yet of eye contact with the parent. And they're not necessarily attached because they're more getting their needs met on a regular basis. Now, as they get older, between 6 weeks and 7 months, they start to show preference for primary and secondary caregivers. So they'll pick their parents. They want to be with their parents or whoever it is that's taking that's the primary caretaker. That could be a grandparent. That could be a family friend. Whoever it is who's spending most of the time with the infant, they start to show that preference. Now, between 6 months and going up to about 10, they become discriminant. they really show that attachment to one specific caregiver. It could be the parent, it could be the father, it could be whoever it is that's giving them the primary care. They start to show that attachment for that one parent. And then as they get older and all of those stages of attachment come together, they begin to bond with other people. And that's what we want to see. We want to see that bonding that takes place beyond that primary attachment. Um, if this all goes as planned, we have a child with secure attachment. And this is shown here with a positive emotion when they see caretakers. We also see problems with other attachment when they don't go through all this. This is ambivalent attachment, where they're scared of strangers, avoidant attachment, where they don't want to be around their parents, or disordered attachment, where they're not really sure who they would be attached to. So as we go through this module, think about things that you've seen, examples you've seen in your life in terms of different parenting styles and how that may affect outcomes of children. Also think about creating that attachment where we see children really forming those secure bonds with caregivers and those secure bonds with parents and with family members. That is so important as they start to work their way through life and become secure adults.